Armstrong, Professor of Communications at the University of Buffalo at the State University of New York. Thanks for joining us. Let's start off. Traditionally, Super Tuesday has somewhat determined a clear front runner for the race. That hasn't happened today, has it?
No, and it wasn't going to coming in. This is a very convoluted race between really essentially three men, although there are four running in the election. And it's now looking like they're becoming more regionalized in terms of their strength.
Well, the state everybody's watching for now is Ohio. It's down to the wire. What are your predictions on that?
That's my home state, and it's proving to be as typical as Ohio always is, because how Ohio goes will probably determine the future of politics in the United States. Now, of course, Barack Obama is another element in this race, and we're not talking about that. This is just for the GOP at this point. But it's very, very close. About 2,500 votes are separating Romney and Santorum, with Santorum having a slight lead. And it's really very interesting to look at the exit polls, because it's telling us, those in the media, that Santorum is very good with people who are hurting, with people who have low incomes, with no college background, people who live in less urban areas. And Romney is doing very well, particularly with women. And I don't think that's an accident because of some of the comments of Santorum lately. But he's doing very well in the urban areas and those who are educated and well off. So we're really looking at two or three candidates that are separating themselves based on not only ideology, but also on regionalism.
Oh, Bob, observers are saying Mitt Romney has really fallen short of sealing the deal today. What are some factors that could influence his performance going forward?
The most telling thing that I saw in the exit polls is that Romney needs to get the message back on the economy. Although it has improved lately, and that's going to help Obama, President Obama, Romney needs to keep hitting that he is a business person who has some background in solving the United States' economic problems. When we talk about social issues, which is what has dominated the discourse for the last 2 weeks, Santorum is appealing to ultra-conservatives. And Romney needs to take that discourse away and get it back on the economy, because when we talk about the economy, almost everyone who's a Republican say Romney is the man.
Well, as you mentioned earlier, Vic Santorum, he certainly appealed to a significant proportion of voters. But how far do you think he can take this?
I don't think he can take it very far. I mean, when we talk about the number of states, you know, it's 3 and 3 right at the moment. At the end of the day, it'll probably be 5, 4, and 1, with Romney winning most of them. In terms of delegates, it's not even close, although it's still a very low number right now in the United States. In almost all that I can read, Romney is at least double, maybe even more than what Santorum has. And so it's got to be tough for him to break out of anything but the conservative vote.
Well, let's talk a little about the people who are voting, the Republican electorate. Voter turnout so far has been described as moderate to low. Would it be accurate to interpret this as a lack of enthusiasm?
Absolutely. In fact, that's what the exit polls are showing. There are some states that Democrats can cross out over and create some mischief in the election. But for the most part, when you're looking at Republican voters, most people who voted for Santorum today decided today to vote for Santorum. They went into the poll, and that's how they made their choice. The support for him is maybe a mile wide, but an inch deep. In terms of those who really care about who the GOP nominee will ultimately be in November, again, the poll suggests that Romney is the man.
Well, let's talk a bit about the Republican Party as a whole. What do you make of comments that it's becoming increasingly divisive within the party?
I'm not a Republican, but it is clear to anybody who knows American politics that the Republican Party has splintered now into at least 3 different camps. There's the libertarian camp, which wants government completely out of everything except foreign policy, and those would be the Ron Paul supporters, about 10 to 12% of the Republican Party. Then you have the difference between social conservatives and those who want to win the election in November. Social conservatives did have Gingrich and Santorum to choose from. It's really hard for me to see how Gingrich can stay in the race. Santorum is the person, but that's 1/3 of the party's members. The other half or so are those who want to win in November, and they're going to choose Romney. He does appear to be, even though this is a big day, the nominee, the preemptive nominee coming in November.
Well, of the four remaining candidates, depending on who wins, we know it's going to be a long, drawn-out race at this point. Just how worried should President Obama be ahead of November's election?
That's the hardest question of all, and I think that's the one that would get the most discussion among people who are pundits or folks who are commenting on the elections. I would say that, a lot can happen between now and November. Right now, I think Mr. Obama looks pretty good in terms of the economy getting better, and I think he's able to get his message a little bit better organized and communicated. But, it only takes one Katrina to absolutely let everything fall apart, or if the economy goes sour. I think that that would give an opening to the GOP. We'll see. That's why we have elections, but I think there's an awful lot of real estate between now and November, and a lot can happen. But I think it looks good for the president.
One last question for you, Bob. Let's talk about the elections on a broader level. President Obama came in as the first African-American leader. Mitt Romney, a Mormon, making waves in the Republican Party. How much of a factor is race and religion in this day and age?
I think that those are the topics that aren't discussed in most media outlets, but I think it has a factor. I don't think it is the primary factor. I think some people believe that the country is very sick. It needs, help in terms of social issues and abortion and contraception and all those kind of things that Mr. Santorum brings to the argument. But I think if you're looking at, are people not liking Obama because he's an African American? That's very possible, and I think the GOP has to look within themselves. But then also, too, is the GOP not responding to Mr. Romney partly because he's a woman? Well, I think that there's a percentage that might be true for. And I think the Republicans have got to come to terms with the fact that we have a new type of candidate, a man who doesn't really come off as genuine and sincere all the time, who does make some verbal mistakes. I think they've got to come to terms with that and start to heal within the next 5 or 6 months.
Thanks so much for speaking with us.
Sure.
I've been speaking to Professor Bob Armstrong from the University of Buffalo, the State University of New York. Well, before we go for a short break, let's take a look at other